So a little bit of background real quick on just what you're about to experience. We have been running this next program for the last 4 years. It's called Better Ancestors. It's a quarterly showcase of writers of color. And we solicited the first 5 authors to read up to 10 minutes of whatever they wanted. And then they get to invite one person to perform at the next show. And then at the end of the year, we publish an anthology of all their work. So we do have the last 3 anthologies over there. Connie's waving at the books table. At any point today, please feel free to go check out some of our previous publications. We've published some 120 books or so, magazines. We've even made an album. There's a cassette over there. Some of the authors you'll hear from today also have brought books and other merchandise, so please check those all out at the table. I want to say that, we're celebrating the 4th anniversary of Better Ancestors on December 13th at our 15-year anniversary, which will be at the Museum of the African Diaspora in San Francisco. So one of the things that we do for this event is we invite somebody who performed in the previous show to be a special host for the event. And it is my true delight to introduce Tadeh Kennedy to you today. He performed in our last event and just completely blew my mind with his storytelling. Tadeh is an Oakland-based writer, educator, editor, musician, and comics maker. He's deeply impacted by his Armenian roots, exploring the intersection of borders, language, and erasure, writing horror, speculative, and historical fiction. He hopes to see the inside of a volcano one day. Tadeh is a Joe Brainerd Fellowship recipient, served as the fiction editor for the incredible 14 Hills magazine out of SFSU between 21 and 23, is a lecturer at SFSU, and has led writing workshops in Yerevan and Gyumri, Armenia. He has worked as a writing coach and freelance editor for 3 years and is working on his debut novel. I wrote a note to remind you that, or to say that he absolutely blew me away, but I already said that. Y'all make some noise for Tadeh Kennedy.
Thanks, Evan. Thank you, everybody. I'll keep this pretty short. I was going to make the announcement of the 15-year anniversary coming up, so give another round of applause for that. Today is September 14th, which means that 3 months away exactly is the 15-year anniversary. So readings are interesting because they're kind of formed of like 3 separate acts, right? There's the act of the reader who is writing their writing, right? And then there's the second act of creativity where the reader is choosing the excerpts that they're going to present to you, that they're going to offer you, right? Bringing here as their offerings. And then there's also the creative act of them reading their work for you, right? Making the creative choices that they're making. But then there's the third creative act of you, the listener, right? Not so many events require this amount of stillness and attention as reading do, right? You go to a music show, you can kind of chill there, talk to people, let it happen in the background, but this requires a different level of attention, right? So we're all kind of creating this area together. Your attention is also feeding the readers and the readers are feeding you. So it's kind of a trifecta of offerings. So thank you, and give yourself, a little round of applause for finding that way to listen. A couple Armenian proverbs to leave you with before we go here. The first one is Khoski artsat lurtuni oski, which means speech is silver, silence is gold, right? The other one is hens lazuna vor karutsum kam kandum ashkhari, which means it's the tongue that builds or destroys the world. So I'll leave you with those 2, and I will introduce our first author, a friend of mine, Karla Myn Khine. Karla Myn Khine is a Filipino-Burmese poet and writer from South Texas, currently pursuing her MFA at San Francisco State University, where she also teaches and is a recent recipient of the Daniel Langton Poetry Prize, an Academy of American Poets University Award, and a Marcus Graduate Scholar. Her work has appeared or is forthcoming in The Pinch, Show Poetry Journal, Poets.org, Radar Poetry, and elsewhere. You can find out more at karlakine.com. Please put your hands together for Karla.
All right. Thank you, Tadeh, for that wonderful introduction. It's so nice to see your face again since we've graduated. And thank you, Evan, for inviting me for this. You know, ever since I moved to San Francisco from Texas, I've heard about Quiet Lightning and Better Ancestors. So when a friend of mine invited me, you know, I couldn't say yes quick enough. But yeah, I'm super excited and honored to be here. I just have 7 poems to read. Hopefully it'll be under 10 minutes. But this is from something I've been working on for a while now. It's a chapbook. Probably it's going to be a book because it's too many to put in a chapbook. Titled Quasi-Metalloid, and it's kind of taking or borrowing the titles from constellations, and I kind of use that as a springboard, as a springboard for, you know, whatever content that inspires. All right. So this first poem is called Ascension. What a young girl needs are more records and compact discs, i.e., less modular streaming and more definition fronting her eyes. She needs to learn how to swim, to ride a bike in rainy weather, though she despises drowning in all forms, especially past undoings, failed retentions, and dirty laundry. This girl is a 20-something, working something, in search of variety, direction, and smart art. She has been mistaken for an actual rationality once at Cup of Joe, wearing a Victorian Gothic painting shirt cut at the midriff, a piece of outgoing mail between her ring finger and pinky. Her mother gave her meekness, her father residence. Each morning, this girl thinks of every possible way she could begin her day as her curtains scrape the sunlight coming in. Residual beams falling to the carpet, turning into micro-splendors for the dust to dance on. In an attempt to contrive incentive, she dreams of how worthy a person she is. In the background of her brain is a figure pathetic and unyielding, a figure attached to the same name she calls herself, but no body, but nobody. This next poem is called Salem, or The Chisel. I sculpt when I cut my arm off in a dream. The same goes for taking birth control, kissing my man, and eating fast food. I shape fashion, madness, my own ruts in the system. A journal of mine made light of this with a quote from my grandfather, a Burmese man whose Buddha cracked twice, once from the British, again from the Japanese. You cry like your fingernails are being torn off. Then I had never noticed how light his touch was, and how his lightness felt like fleets of wind, and the throbs they left, perhaps slight heartbeats, given through padded rings that have flipped through many prayer books. Who is he now, in those impersonal parts that made him? A towel hangs from my mirror, wet from an earlier shower. Yesterday's bang and nail trimmings sit placidly in a Walgreens bag. Saltwater crocodiles in a mangrove settle upon the half-century footprints of military marches. Though exigent, I wait until the receding of the universe's prefectures because the Buddha taught me everything depends on everything else. Then I will cut off what fouls my heart, repurpose, remodel it. It will be their recreation. Now I understand things, how they're all a cause. This next poem is called Cancer. My mom did her own saline drips during chemo, inserted the IV into herself in the living room while Eat Bulaga played on the TV. My 1-month-old niece had just passed, so my family stayed in one room for hours. Uproars of laughter, bright lights, loud muffles of the mic being too close. But I looked at my mother. I look at my mom. How she always seems to be in the middle of closing her eyes, how beneath everything she must feel it. Outside, the sun has begun to drop, so when she opens her eyes again, it's a different world she's in. 2 years past, her hair has grown back, shoulder length, thin, her shirts flatter on one side, eyebrows sparse. Now she spends her days playing mahjong on her iPad, sending my siblings and I the daily Wordle, forgetting that something is on the stove until the verge of explosion. All I can think about, upstairs, downstairs, when I'm at home, is how ruin is both a verb and a noun. This one is called Reticulum, or net. They recently installed nets under the sides of the Golden Gate Bridge to reduce deaths, they say, patent pending, Although designed to cause immense pain, the nets are supposed to stand as a, quote, symbol of hope, according to someone's supervisor, and someone's supervisor's supervisor. Ask yourself, does a hope place beget hope, or is where hope itself congregates, sinking to the bottom of the mesh because it is denser than the worry around it? Gaze long enough into the net, and you become the net. Sieve the meaning of suicide, and eventually you'll get bits of will to chew on. Zero-sum lifespan, kamikaze wage workers renting happiness on a month-to-month lease. Record-breaking heat waves are Earth's voicemails to humanity's fossil fuel answering machine. This is not to say the past was any better. This is not to say the present is innocent, but that the 18% automatic gratuity paid for the price of life isn't even going to the worker. Strictly speaking, we all reserve the right to die, though even more so, we deserve the right to live without all the add-ins. We deserve to take flight instead. This next one is titled Auriga, or Charioteer. Dad drives me 2,000 miles to San Francisco, California. We listen to NPR news and stand-up comedy sets as the jagged, craggy outcrops of rock set the stage around us. I have a note on my phone of potential talking points. Daddy, can you name every country? Dad, what happened the day I was born? Can you remember what you almost named me? Why Texas? Why America? None of these ever make it past the LCD screen, though I know the answers to the last two have roots in the land of neocolonialism. I just don't want this to be wasteful, I think to myself, for all these hours, these days to be just that. I used to think my dad was a robot, after coming home from work that he was taking out wires instead of untying laces, the loosening of his necktie, a decompression process. I can't tell myself when this belief broke, but I can't seem to shake the possibility as Dad is on his 18th hour of driving. The motion of a cruising car, rock and sway, asleep in the back seat, how I miss opening my eyes once I felt the familiar bump of our driveway collapse into my body, my dad turning his head to me in a move that says time to surrender. This feels no different. I close my eyes and wait for the holding together. Right. This one is called Aries. The sheep across the street, in a recurring dream I've titled Have At, told me I must look into different ways to arrive at myself. So far, I have 1.5. 1, make more lists. Lists are great management. 1/2, love my nose. This one I'll probably never complete, hence the half. On my do more often checklist, there's something about asking the stars for more home, unbeaten, unalloyed, though the only thing I find permissible from them in this euchred and perverse asking is the notion that I'm just an object, a morsel of mortal, limitable, drastic. This is the last one. The title of this one is just 4 question marks, so I'm not sure how to verbalize that. Okay, here we go. Chained, tortured daughter, a waking fish, the legs of a walking boar, a noose of displeasure in the form of a neck-adhering collar. I am still a baby looking out at the world through the buckled back seat of Dad's company sedan. What are clouds made of is the translation of the image variance going on in my brain. Though I didn't know of this yet, the theory of condensed water vapor is always panting in the air. It's what now ropes me out of bed, compels me to hope off the train, love my way down the street, as I mouth to myself, the end of today is not tomorrow, while entering the human heart. Thank you.
Keep it going for Karla, you guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Karla. I love that line. Gaze into the net, you become the net. And also asking the stars for more home. Very nice. So next up we have Alex Feliciano Mejia. Is a writer and artist and researcher working across essayistic, poetic, and time-based media to study the contradictions posed to communities by racial capitalism. Their work has been supported and displayed by places such as Kearney Street Workshop, Southern Exposure, Root Division, and Gray Area. He is employed as an assistant professor of critical literacy at San Francisco State University, where he is also an MFA student in creative writing. Alex is also a lifelong skateboarder and sees skating as a foundational part of everything they do. Awesome. Give it up for Alex.
All right. Thank you all for who have participated in organizing this and come here on this beautiful day. I'm really excited to be here and grateful for the time to share space with you all and learn from your work. I'm going to read a work in progress excerpt from a piece that's kind of like a hybrid piece called Whose Civil War Is This? Yeah. And so, yeah, I'll start. Guatemala, 1982. Ernesto knew that something would go wrong here. He didn't know if it would be the stolen medicine or the stolen films, but something might completely fall apart. The early morning before the sun had come out, he dragged a projector, 400 feet of 16 millimeter film, and an electrical inverter 8,000 feet up the Mazatenango Mountains toward a department rich in color, clothing, textiles, and agriculture, but likely lacking in audiovisual repair specialists. He'd driven his truck with boxes full of medical supplies, painkillers, bandages, gauze, antibiotics, anti-inflammatories, tourniquets, needles, vials full of medicines he'd never heard of. He was just a truck driver. The pharmacists were the ones who actually knew what this stuff did. So even though he was ready to hand over these supplies and project his training films for the militants of the cell, the reality was that he wasn't ready to describe the medical supplies, nor to fix anything that went wrong with the projector. He was doing the best he could. Luckily, it wasn't just up to him. As he pulled his truck over on at the start of the dirt road that split off before the turn toward the municipality's town center, he cut the lights just as he'd been instructed to do. This was his first time arriving at the cell's camp, and he was lost in thought when a figure in his peripheral vision knocked on the passenger window. He reached over from the driver's side and opened the door. "You're early. Lucky I was here. Let me have the keys. I should drive." "Okay." He complied quickly. He was a team player and knew when to follow the leadership's direction. But he didn't know this particular comrade, so anxiety crept up from the soles of his feet. "I'm Chico, subcomandante of the group. It's good to meet you, brother." "Buenos dias, Chico, un placer." Warmth emanated from the center of their palms as they shook hands. "Okay, I'm going to drive up here. The road's a little tricky with the mud." As they finished unloading the materials into the storage tent, a large canvas square that felt more permanent and fixed than Ernesto had expected, Chico nodded his head toward the only wooden box that had been stored in the cab of the truck, behind the front seats. "Should we store that one too?" No, that's the projector. I'll need that with me to make sure it works before we start the training. Can you help me carry it though?" Chico nodded. "Okay, let's get you to your tent so you can unpack your stuff." They walked over a few meters away where the series of tents had been set up, 3 rows of 3 tents each, and Chico showed Ernesto where he'd be staying. "This is yours, and they told us that you needed more space to prepare the film, so you'll have this all to yourself. That work?" The tent was a larger one, enough for several people to sleep snugly if they lay down next to each other, maybe enough for 3 or 4, tightly packed in. But it was for Ernesto solo, a studio of sorts. "Yeah, thank you, this is perfect, but where's the generator?" "Ah, yes, that's right behind the supply tent. I'll show it to you later. And it's right behind the back of the tent that we thought could work as a backdrop for the screen." That works, but I brought a small one too." Ernesto pointed toward a rectangular metal tube, olive green colored, that was sticking out of the supply box that he'd been carrying with him in the truck. "Great, okay, I'll leave you to it for now, but let me know if you need anything." Chico turned back toward the canvas tent to organize the medical supplies. Ernesto opened the lid of the wooden box with his film projection equipment and unloaded the materials so that he could turn the top of the box into a work table. 2 hand crank rewinds for moving the footage back and forth, a viewer to spool the film through and look at it without needing the projector itself, and 4 tin film canisters with the film he'd stolen from his brother's martial arts dojang in Guatemala City. He set up the 2 rewinds, clamping them onto the edge of the wooden box, and placed the rewind in the center. He had the remainder of the day to prepare everything for tomorrow's training, so he needed to hustle to actually edit the footage together. He'd never done this before. Sure, he'd edited together film, university projects, Those were opportunities for him to think through the sequence of material, and he'd been proud of the films he'd made, as experimental, sketchy, and tentative as they'd been. But this was different. This was a training for militants who were risking it all to fight the military, and he had the footage that they needed to understand the government's counterinsurgency. He loaded up the first reel into the rewind, ran it through the viewer, and then inserted the leader to the take-up spool. Right when he was about to pick up the first can of 100 feet spool of film, Chico appeared at the opening of the tent. Oye, so sorry to interrupt. He hunched over, his head just barely touching the top of the tent as he leaned through the opening left by the canvas door. No problem, brother. What's up? So I was wondering, any chance you need help with this? I noticed how heavy the box was, and I know that can be confusing to figure out the power around here. And to be honest, I'm pretty interested in learning. If it's not too much, could I help you out and kind of watch what you're doing? Yeah, man, that's fine, Ernesto said excitedly, but cautiously, keeping in mind the whole time that while he could definitely show Chico how to work the rewinds and the splicer, any shortcomings in the projector would be hard to fix, and he'd be embarrassed if this happened in front of one of the militants. But he couldn't say no, and he really didn't want to. He wanted this type of collaboration. Okay, so what I'm doing here, see, these are the rewinds we're going to load the film onto. Yeah. I've seen this in the movies. But are we going to be watching them on that little screen, just one person at a time? No. The thing is that these 4 rolls have all of the Caibiles training programs in them. But some of it is just exercise and practice, stuff that's not important for you guys. We need to go through all this stuff, cut out the combat training, splice that together so that we can have a single reel of all the best clips. You're going to cut the film, won't it damage it? Well, yeah, we're going to cut it, but we're going to tape it back together using this. It's a splicer. Ernesto held up a gray metallic object heavy in his hand and demonstrated how the guillotine worked to trim the film right at the sprocket and how the tape could be dispensed and then trimmed to create a perfect connection between 2 frames of film. The 2 men huddled over the single-person viewer and started running the first reel through, Ernesto gently maintaining the tension on the feed reel and Chico using his right hand to turn the crank and the take-up reel. As they moved through the film, Ernesto would call out, "Okay, stop," whenever the film got to a scene where there was hand-to-hand combat, weapons practice, mostly sword and staff combat, and he'd use the splicer to cut that clip, put the selection in a small bag, and splice the remaining together before continuing to watch it. After cutting out several sections where the soldiers in the film were doing the exercises, precisely the clips that Ernesto said were not needed, Chico asked to stop for a moment. Fíjese que I know you didn't want to include all that stuff, but those exercises, they actually look pretty useful for us. We train and do warm-ups, but we don't do it like they do. Yeah, right. They're good, but that's not the most important part of this. I think that figuring out how to deal with the sword styles and the hand-to-hand combat's the main thing, don't you think? I mean, yeah, that's crucial, but our battle with the Caibiles isn't just going to be about who can win during the fight. It's going to be about how prepared we are too, how we're feeling, how fit we are. Ernesto wasn't a military guy. He was a poet, a filmmaker, a student. But here he was explaining to a militant in Masate how to prepare a guerrilla strategy for defeating the more elite members of the Guatemalan military. He knew his place. He shouldn't be telling these guys what to do. But he also knew something about what was important in these films. He was the one who stole them from the dojang. He was the one who knew that these were used to train the elite military squad, and he was the one who risked it all to bring the knowledge all the way up here to the Cerro. But he also knew he wanted to take leadership from these folks, from his comrades in the making. Okay, well, what I'm worried about is that the film's going to be too much, that it's going to have too much separate stuff to learn. This is supposed to help us, help you all prepare. So I don't know what I'm worried about. I'm just worried about wasting time. Chico straightened up his back, turned his body to Ernesto. Look, we need these films, and we can do just the same thing we're doing here. Separate the clips, but instead of just splicing them back together, we can make 2 piles, make 2 films. Ernesto could tell when he was receiving an order, but more importantly, when to follow the order. The 2 guys got back to work, this time making 2 separate piles of selected clips, and once they'd gone through the first can of film, they started splicing the 2 groups of clips together. As they were finishing up, a voice came through the opening in the tent. Ernesto turned and looked up from the splicer and saw that there was a group of 5 militants standing behind the comrade who had gotten their attention. Chico, hey, can we watch the films? The comrade asked, making eye contact with Chico. Chico spoke to them, using language that Ernesto didn't understand, just before turning back to Ernesto and saying, I'm giving the approval for this, and we should wait to put it on the projector until it's time for the comrades to watch together, But let's let them come in here and watch a little bit of our selects on the viewer here without sound. Ernesto paused for a moment, taking in the faces of the comrades who'd gathered, and he started to remember the vibe he'd felt when he was watching the workouts at the dojang in the city, the way his brother had practiced sparring with his partners, how they'd started all their practices with chanting, with group stretching, how they'd executed their forms with one another, sword on sword, staff on sword, some kind of trust needed to swing at one another with weapons that would kill, trust that he'd seen in each movement of their bodies. He turned back to Chico. Got it. I think we can all see if we just huddle around and close the tent so there's less light. He gestured at the comrades to come in the tent, to sit down in front of the makeshift table they'd made out of the box. He put his hand back on the take-up reel and started turning it to the right. Thank you.
All right. Did anybody else feel like they were in that room with Ernesta? Nice. Give another round of applause to Alex. Does anybody know that Pirates of the Caribbean is based off of China Camp? I'm just kidding. It's not. That's where I feel like I am right now. Okay. Next up, we have Sarah O'Neal coming up. Sarah is a queer, Moroccan, Black, and Muslim artist and writer born and raised in the Bay Area. Sarah's work grapples with the impact of colonial violence on familial memory and the way systems of oppression shape the most intimate detail of our lives. Sarah's debut collection, Even Two Hands Pressed Together Are Split, that's a great name, brought together poetry, photography, and ephemera to create an immersive experience for readers to explore the way embodied trauma shapes all of our relationships. Her writing has been featured in the Institute for Palestine Studies, The Nation, and Teen Vogue. When she's not writing, you can find her scheming on the end of Empire. How are you doing on that? Going good? Almost there? Almost there? Swimming laps or on Instagram and Twitter at Atay Queen, Atay Queen. Give a round of applause to Sarah.
Yeah, so far it's looking a little rough on the end of Empire, but, doing our best. Hey, everyone. My name is Sarah O'Neal. I'm very, very honored to be here. Can we please clap it up one more time for the organizers for having us in this beautiful space, for Evan specifically, for all of the work and labor and love that has gone into having us here on this beautiful Saturday. I feel deeply honored to be here. I grew up in the California state parks, swimming, camping, hiking. And so to be able to share my work here, it really means a lot to me. And to just be standing on the shore of such a deep history that holds so much of this history of migrants making a life for themselves, and then before them, the indigenous people that stewarded this land. And I'm just kind of being reminded of, one, how stunning and beautiful California is, but also the very deep and violent history of settler colonialism that has shaped this land, and how we all have an obligation as we enjoy its beauty, as we get to witness it in these ways, to also do right by this history and acknowledge the ways in which this history is still very present with us today. So it's just something I'm sitting with, and thank you all for listening. I know we've been kind of sitting for a while too, so if you need to listen better by standing up, moving around, switching seats, feel free to do so. I will not feel any kind of way. Support yourself however you need. This first poem is dedicated to my father, Abdulmalik Mason O'Neal Jr. It's titled Martyrs Never Die. Aren't we all missing someone who intended to hold us? Aren't we all waiting for a steady knock at the front door? All that's lost and weeping between us, I remember the stretch of my father's hands, how much they held, how much more they intended to hold. My baby eyes turned up to him like his spirit drew my orbit, and maybe it did. And maybe that's why I find myself in every city he called home, wondering where he used to sit, rest his feet. The ghosts are tangled in my throat again. The smoke pulls them through like fish hooks, drawing blood, small threaded lines of red. I trace the purple in my fingers, the green rivers connecting my palm. I wrap my forefinger and thumb around my wrist. I feel for bone and my father. Always my father in my lilting eyes and outstretched palms while I pray the prayer of martyrs, their forefingers pointed towards the sky as they use their last breath to swear that there is no God but God, and the prophet is his messenger. And I think about the young men in Palestine, in Gaza and Jenin and Nablus, in Sudan and Yemen, how they recover their last slivers of life to make shahada, and I think about all of the ones who died this way, survived this way, how my father must have raised his finger in the end, or at least his chin, to make this final declaration, how my ancestors must have done the same, the ones who were taken from homelands in West Africa and brought to this bloodied soil in chains, how these words must have been their comfort, their compass towards sanity, how these words quilt all of our martyrs together as they reach for life even in the end. Which is why we say, Shuhada'na ma matu, aishin jambina. Our martyrs did not die. They live alongside us. I keep thinking about this phrase in Arabic, Thawra hatta nasr, revolution until victory. Revolution until victory, revolution until the land is free, and the people are free, and the water is free, and the sky is free, and the moon is free, and the sun is ours. The sun is ours. The sun is ours, and fire is not turned on us, is not used to mutilate and maim and massacre, is not used to exterminate or extinguish life. And the olive trees sing again, and the figs too. And the pomegranate orchards spill out in abundance, each seed a vessel of blood, the only drops that will ever touch this soil again. And I think about the veins in my palm, how they run back through my mother, and my mother's mother, and her mother before her, all this blood streaming into me and pouring out, and all I ask for is some guidance, some spirit older than me to hold me as I hold this. I'm trying to honor the stories you've gifted me, the verses I inherited before I knew what it was to be connected through a God greater than the ones who rule us with their military bases and jets and tanks and automatic rifles ripping through holy skin, and still to say Allahu Akbar in spite of all of this, and still to lift a stone or a pen or your simple gaze even, to spit in their faces and refuse to submit or surrender, knowing shahada is the ultimate surrender. May God make shuhada of us all. Make our breath greater than the short lives we were given, the short lives we squander as we obsess over how to hold on to this earth that was never ours to begin with. I came into this world with my father's palm wrapped around my fist. I came into this world holding on, but I am learning this life is simply a rehearsal for the next. So I'm learning to let go and let go and let go until I can hold his hands again. This next poem, you don't have to do right by my mama too. I love her. So this next poem is for my mother. It's titled Hereafter. My mother wanted to protect us, wanted our childhoods idyllic, and everything hers wasn't. I remember the way she would rub my back sometimes to help me fall asleep, singing in that voice I've only heard echoed by my aunties back home. Ninniya mamu, taite butamu. And I never asked her how she memorized this melody, or who rubbed her back when her tummy ached, or when she missed her own dead mother, the woman she's named after, who's remembered by her ocean black hair and sharp cheekbones. My mother was a baby once, motherless, and I still can't find the words to ask how she learned to continue with this ache in her throat. Did she fill it with rage or bury it? Use her quiet like a sharpened blade against those who tried to get too close too quick? Did she ever speak to her? Ask questions and wait for the signs that inevitably show an answer? I talk to my long dead father, and he speaks back sometimes, tells me how to channel the rage, shows me how to pull my body through the water so I can learn to survive all that wails inside me. I miss him still, I tell Mama over the phone. And this time, she says, I know. Soft, distant. I feel her tuck herself back in through the echo in the phone line. I want to tell her it's okay to miss like this. It's okay to not be over it, to never be over it. I miss him like a long breath pulled through my lungs. I hold in the screams until I can release them under the current. Let the water carry all that aches. I ask her if she reaches for him, speaks to him the way I learned to. She says, of course not. You cannot speak to what is no longer. I want to show her he is everywhere, reaching out for us, carrying us when the ache is too much, her mother too, my henna. I feel her soft palms on my shoulders sometimes when my muscles have knotted themselves and I cannot turn my neck from the pain. And I know she is with me, holding me in the only way she still can, and I want my mama to be held like this, loved like this. She tells me she speaks to God. That's all who needs to hold her now. And I want her to know she does not have to choose. She can have them all. Guardians of the spirit realm, protectors of our lineage who care for us in ways beyond comprehension. I stop trying to understand. I open the door to my heart. I let the water in. I let the salt and the ash and the waves open me. Rinse my spirit into a new form of surrender. I walk the path. All right, I have one last poem for y'all. How are we feeling? How are we doing? We need to get up. We need to stretch. We need to move around. Please feel encouraged to do so. I know we've been sitting for a little minute. This last poem is a new poem, something I wrote recently, an attempt to sort of process the ongoing genocide in Palestine and make sense of the kind of lives we are forced to live under this neoliberal capitalist world that we are trapped in. So, you know, a lot to process, but this was an attempt. I've had so many conversations this week about the state of things, how to make sense of the horrors the ruling class inflicts on some while it traps the rest of us in a state of denial, despair, or straight up delusion. The other day, an old friend and I caught up over the phone. Apparently, in our last conversation, I had bluntly asked him what he was doing for Palestinian liberation. I don't really remember the conversation. I don't remember the bulk of the last 11 months' time is no longer marked by months, but by massacres. He brought up our last conversation and how difficult it can be to know how to fight for justice around issues within the U.S., like police violence or the housing crisis, let alone foreign policy. I start to break down how these things were never separate, how the military state is also the police state, how our inability to resist what happens over there is a direct result of our inability to face what is happening right here. But I soon realized that even I was tired of repeating these same points. The people he surrounds himself with aren't interested in connecting struggles, so it broke my heart. Because all of the things I thought about saying still wouldn't reach through. And I didn't know what to make of this fact other than hang up and sit with how far away I felt from this friend I've loved for so long. It's a question echoing through a lot of my friendships. What can we do? On FaceTime, another friend confesses her disgust, how frustrated she feels with friends who have decided to just tune out altogether, leaving her to deal with her rage alone. I think about hurting people sometimes, she tells me. I tell her how I think about hurting myself, how all of this rage and pain and despair has no one person to aim it towards, how it all gets turned inwards, how it's easier to imagine the end of my life than this empire's, even though I know the day is coming soon. After asking how he keeps going, Another friend says that we must tend to our practices, step by step, brick by brick. Build something that will hold enough power to actually change things, that we have a duty to commit to our dreams and make them realities when so many are being robbed of space to dream at all. I want to believe him. I want showing up for the page to feel as literal as showing up for the studio, but it doesn't somehow. I can't escape the futility, as much as I try. In a voice note, another friend tells me our words shape the way people think, the way people feel, and the power of that tiny transformation reverberates even when it feels too small to point to. You can always create a community, they tell me. You can always create a little more room for yourself in this world, and maybe this is my attempt. How indebted I am to every friend who calls even when I can't pick up. For every hand that has offered me hot tea and a place to sit, I see our efforts. I don't want to dismiss them. I don't know whether or not they're enough, but I know it matters every time a keffiyeh is raised and Palestine is lifted up. I know this. I know this because I know how it feels to find a map that actually says Palestine where it should, written across that stretch of land cradling the Mediterranean Sea. Maps that know Gaza as a city, not a strip. And I know how much effort went into creating the colonial vision we live in and convincing us it is the only reality to have existed at all. Every tear in the fabric of their truth brings us closer to the freedom our martyrs wrote poems about. We feel lonely because we know something is missing. Because no matter how much this system convinces us that the void we feel is because we aren't accumulating enough side hustles to manifest our fantasies, our spirits know there is more to life than this. That we do not want lives that distract us from the truth that our very living standards necessitate violence somewhere. Whether or not we feel the boot at our neck, our spirits are bearing the cost. The price gouging we are experiencing, what the media keeps calling inflation, is what the global South has survived for generations under U.S. imperialism. Our lives are meant to be lived, not earned. I do not want to overlay images of grieving mothers to tell you something is wrong here. I do not want to compare the corpses of people who were lynched to the people left in the rubble to suffocate. I want enough space to mourn every person. I want space for every family to remember who they loved, for every orphan to carve out the space where they once had a family. I want enough space on the wall for everyone's names. Thank you.
I don't want my words to blend in with Sara, so give another round of applause to Sara. We started off with a little Armenian proverb I'll bring it back to. It's the tongue that builds or destroys worlds. So I think that brings us closer to destroying that empire that you're. So thank you. Yeah. This has been a wonderful day. We have our last reader, Kato. Where is he? Kato is a friend, is a Ugandan American poet, essayist, and short story writer who has recently completed an MA in creative writing in San Francisco State University. His work dances with a wide spectrum of topics and tensions among them: human depth in a cursory world, the African experience in the American context, the Black experience in non-Black spaces, and the beautiful anxieties conceived inside all of them. His writing can be found in Peach Magazine, Pop Matters, The Anna, and Protein Magazine. Please put your hands together for Kato.
Thanks, Tadeh. Um, so first, oh, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, good to see you. Thanks. So first, shout out to all of the previous writers that came before me. I think this is my introduction to basically all of you. So I feel really grateful to be able to share a stage with such a dope, I guess, creative range of artists. And of course, thank you to the organizers and Evan for all the work you guys have put in. Sorry, my voice is kind of deep, so sometimes I can sound kind of like uninterested, but I have to remind myself to like animate my voice a little bit. Okay, there we go. Hey, hey. Okay, let me like loosen up a little bit. Okay, I think I'll start off light and kind of gradually get heavier and darker and heavier and darker. So starting off light, maybe we could start with a game, yeah? How old were you when you realized most of the things you've learned you weren't taught? By the time her smile revealed itself to be a thief, it was too late. I've been held captive to an affable chuckle and a pearl-gated smirk for too long. Peruse the leaves of my lineage and something Vedic might climb into your veins for a swim. I've unwrapped the mummy of a bad friend only to find myself wrestling with a mirror. No, but what I can do is teach you how to hush your heart when your eyes pick up where your words left off. So a bit about myself. I'm someone who's really into like aesthetics and like design and stuff. I like when things look nice, I guess you can say. Even if the quality of something is terrible, like if it looks good, I'll be like, all right, you know, how much you want for it? I look at the shapes of letters a lot because I write a lot. And aesthetically speaking, my favorite letter is the letter I, lowercase I, because it's got like its little head and like the body. It's like a little human being or whatever. And I is also interesting because it's, you know, it's I, it's about the self. So this next piece is, it's called This Tragedy Takes Hold Of, and it's basically about the dichotomy of I, the dichotomy of the self. I am the sum of a mangled motif, boiling belief, the cosmos owe me something for serving sambusas at the Berlin conference. When all I've ever really wanted is that my grave be proud of me. I know that you heard true thrill is death on a leash, but it's not an invitation to turn intent into a sauna of sin. Spirit sun-dried and sundered. Maybe that's why you can't look your shadow in the eye. I guess while we're on the topic of I, I also have ADD. And I know like everybody kind of has ADD now, but I had it back before it was popping. Like I had ADD before it was cool to say you have ADD, before it was cool to say you had Adderall. And so my brain is just kind of like a series of like avalanche thoughts. Like my thoughts just kind of cascade into each other. Like if you took a trip into my brain, you'd just be like skiing the whole time. But anyways, this next piece is kind of a reflection of that sort of cascade of thought. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. I felt my spine get sterilized. And I bathed in that signature stench from Stockholm. And I scrubbed every sliver of holy. And I thought implosion was the best way out of a bubble. And I wore youth like an armchair as the calendars undressed. And I sprinkled the 90s onto some avocado toast. And I dissented from the hiss of the Jordan logo. And I made a stage out of a conference room. And I pulled a creaky compass out from behind my ears. And I made a parody out of God. And I learned that love means respecting your demons. And now I'm digging through hindsight for my golden era's kiss. And my only dream is that the soil crack a smile once it finally has its way with me. So I guess while we're on the topic of I am also, I come from like, well, I'm Ugandan. I'm a Ugandan American, as Tadeh mentioned in my bio. And I'm like a first generation born in the US or whatever. And I also come from like a military family, so I grew up like moving around a lot. So I say all that to say, like, I guess my sense of self has always kind of been stretched a bit thin. I've always felt like a little bit of everything and not fully enough of anything. So anyways, this next piece, which is my final piece, is a bit of a meditation on that. You can't truly pick yourself up without picking yourself apart first. Sure, therapy postures as a strong remedy, but is it strong enough to hoist me from the heft of teenage rubble? I consider the word hometown to be a threat, or at best, an agent of exposure. Not many other words possess the potency to undress me with such harsh haste. I suppose the word itself, as a naked curation of letters, is fine. But it's the intimate histories that dance behind those letters that gets me. Hometowns belong to those who belong somewhere and can feel that belonging in their bones. My adolescence was supposed to sort most of this stuff out. Someone asking me where I'm from shouldn't ravel my tongue the way it does, the way it always has. I know I belong to some sort of somewhere. It just hasn't found me yet. Thank you, guys.
Keep it going for Kato. Keep it going for all of our readers today. Awesome. Thank you so much for listening to Better Ancestors. I'm going to leave off with one more Armenian proverb. This is Aveli lava gnal gerutun ambori gyuri hetkan mianik gnales harsanik. This means it is better to go into captivity with a group than to go to a wedding alone. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because, yeah, I bring that up. I teach students in an undergrad class about, I teach the undergrad publishing class, and we often talk about the importance of community, not only with these journals, right? But for 15 years, I really can't emphasize enough, for a program to run for 15 years and to consistently be a home base for the Bay Area to publish work in these beautiful, beautiful copies in the back and to consistently bring people together is an amazing, amazing thing. Like there's no way to understate it. So to all the people that are helping out in the back on bringing everybody in, Better Ancestors, this is an incredible thing. Thank you so much for allowing me to host. And so with that, I will pass it off to Evan to have the final word. Thank you, everybody, and thank you to all the readers.